Bizarre Brain Comics. Boom, boom, boom. Hello, this is Gary for Bizarre Brain Comics. It's where we like to talk about some older comics, talk about the creators, sometimes the characters, and go through stories and art. Now, there was a time when giant monsters were constantly menacing the planet, whether they were man-made, aliens from outer space, or just freaks of nature. Well, that's what we're going to talk about a little bit. Talk about here, Monsters on the Prowl. This particular issue is number 17, and then behind it is issue 25. And I want to talk about the specific monster. This is the Colossus. This is a giant granite statue, animated preternaturally and rampaging through various parts of the world. Wreaking destruction in his wake. And this was drawn by Jack Kirby. There's no credits for the writer, but considering it was originally done in 1961, I would presume it was probably Stan Lee who wrote it, or a combination of the two. And here we have the big book of knowledge. Monsters on the Prowl, Marvel Comics. I'm going to talk a little bit about the coming of Colossus and Colossus Lives Again by Jack Kirby and presumably Stan Lee. And this was the title that ran from 1971 to 1974. It is an anthology of fantasy, horror, monster comics, primarily composed of reprint material, but also had some new original material. In fact, one issue even featured the first comic book appearance of Robert E. Howard's King Kull. In fact, that was the issue just before, number 16, just before this issue with Colossus. And later, Colossus was known as It, the Living Colossus. And it's a giant monster character. And it was a gigantic stone statue, initially animated by hostile aliens, and first appeared in Tales of Suspense in 1961. And then shortly thereafter had a follow-up story, which was The Return of Colossus. And then it was reprinted in Monsters on the Prowl in 1972, which is this. And it's one of the few monsters from this era which had a sequel story after its first appearance, and it was revived as a continuing character for a time in Astonishing Tales 21 in 1973. And in this reboot, the statue was sometimes inhabited and animated by the mind of a wheelchair-bound special effects designer who had been introduced in the character's second appearance. And after its run in Astonishing Tales, it was like a 5 or 6 issue run, the monster made occasional appearances in other titles, and at one point was even destroyed by the Incredible Hulk. from what I understand, it came back again in a slightly different form. And those are stories that I've never come across. So, if you're like me and you like these giant monster stories, let's come along and take a look at the Colossus in Monsters on the Prowl. And here we have Monsters on the Prowl 17 and 25. And you can see, unfortunately, this is a very damaged cover on this second issue. I really, well, I like both covers, but I really like this this particular cover illustration. This is by Herb Trimp. Maybe his name is supposed to be Trimpy. I don't know. I just call him Herb Trimp. And I think it's just a great cover. Very dynamic, very eye-catching and engaging. And of course, Herb Trimp was a long-time artist for Marvel, and for quite some time he drew the Incredible Hulk stories, mostly inked by John Severin. And then several years later here, he is the artist on the run of the Marvel Comics version of Godzilla. So he is no stranger to these giant monster genre here, kaiju. And this is just a great cover by Jack Kirby. It makes just the monsters getting up, in a Lilliputian type way here, of very, very dramatic and dynamic, when it's something that wouldn't ordinarily be considered such. And then these are those first two stories. And then, as I said, that the Colossus was later brought back in for several issues of Astonishing Tales, The Living Colossus. And I should still have a couple of the other issues somewhere, but I have this one, and I like this cover too. Now, in this issue and the previous issue, Colossus was fighting another holdover from the old giant monster days of Atlas Marvel. That's Fin Fang Foom, and who became, I believe, primarily an Iron Man villain, antagonist. And he's come back various times, and he's even been shrunk down to human size, at least for a time, and has been both good guy and bad guy. And in this story, he's both a good guy and bad guy. I'll talk a little bit about that later. We want to cover this. I'll just unfortunately, this issue here is missing a couple of pages, so I'm not going to go through the whole story. I'll just give you a brief introduction. This is I Created the Colossus. That's chapter 1. Great splash page. And the story takes place in, they don't call it that, but it's obviously the Soviet Union. And there's this artist, the sculptor, who is the brother of one of the bigwigs in the Kremlin. And the artist is commissioned to construct a statue of fantastic proportions. This is to be a propaganda tool, and he doesn't like that at all. But he doesn't have much choice, so he shows him kind of a montage here of him creating, over several months, creating this 100-foot tall stone statue. Just on the very night that he finishes it, this flying saucer comes down and kind of crashes down. This crab crab-like alien comes out and pursues the fellow, and we find out that his ship is out of commission. He's radioed for help from his own people, but meantime, for safety's sake, he inhabits the giant statue because it's powerful enough to protect him. But of course, by the very fact that he's animating it is also the reason he's in danger. But he animates the statue, crashes around, and he takes out some submarine here, and he's smashing, and the army is a Soviet army is opposing him. They're like virtually helpless. And there's a great one here. He's smashing up has gone underground and smashes up amongst the field pieces of the army. He's even able to levitate it into the air, and it takes on the Air Force. And they're going to nuke it, but he takes the nuke and hurls it clear out into space. And then a rescue ship comes and takes off with him. And thereafter, they're suspicious of, and he's the artist didn't tell him about the aliens. Just said it was mystically animated and was distressed by the oppressive government, so they kind of slacked off a little bit. Now here we go to the second one story. Colossus lives again. Have a good shot of the Colossus, and it gives a recap of that story that we just talked about. And on the aliens' homeworld of Cancreus 3, that's named for cancer. The crab, because they're crab critters. They've resolved their own civil war with aggressors being the victors, and they decide they want to invade Earth because they've got a report from the survivor, and so they send a small party to feel him out more, and they choose to re-inhabit the Colossus, while the statue is being shipped to America for some special purpose. And the ship aliens come down, beam down, and we got 3 of them. And they inhabit the Colossus, and he really takes off. He jumps into the sea, walks to shore. Happens to be in Hollywood. Even messing around. It's a good visual storytelling. It's Jack Kirby, can there not be? And it's just a great way he presents. Now look, just that fairly static image right there is very dramatic, especially from the angle you see the Colossus and the tiny images of the small figures below him, and of course they run in panic, and he's rushing. Rampaging through town. Meanwhile, at the studio, we're introduced to this character who is, what is his name? O'Brien, I think. I'm not sure if they even actually gave him his name. And he is in love with, what's her name? Diane Cummings. He's in love with her. They're friends, but she just won't have anything to do with him romantically because he's just into special effects. She needs someone handsome and dashing, like what's this guy's name? Grant Marshall, who's very handsome, and he's a big star, and she wants him, and he wants her. Well, he pouts a little bit, and then he hears about the monster rampaging, and he comes up with a scheme here, because special effects is his baby, and so they in between scenes of the giant rampage, they show them incredibly swiftly building something on the lot, on the set. And here's the monster, the Colossus, just rips up this hill right up out of the ground. Just this 3-panel. I mean, it's very dramatic. Just 4 simple panels, but you see it them in sequence, and you can just see the power being utilized by this being, and interrupting people in the pool as he crashes through the city. Finally, he's at the studio, and everyone is rushing away. Well, Diane is her dress is caught on some bit of the set, and she can't get away. And the guy she just loves, he panics and he just takes off, abandoning her, even though she's calling for help. Meanwhile, the guy she's not thrilled with, he rushes into harm's way to help her out, and then challenges Colossus. There's something even bigger, more powerful, and I control it, and it will stop you. So the aliens in the Colossus, they turn and see this even larger, seemingly more powerful being in front of them, and they quickly abandon the Colossus to inhabit the larger statue, thinking they'll be even more powerful, not knowing that they fell into the trap. Then the guy O'Brien, he tells his crew, now, and they push a button, and the thing was packed with explosives, because it was just a dummy, a giant dummy, and they just blew it to hell and gone, and that was the end of the aliens. And once again, Colossus is still, and so he shall remain forevermore, or at least until the next story. And I like those. I really like those two. I enjoyed this character. I was not entirely thrilled with the alien aspect, but I got over that. And then we come to here to this. This, of course, this was drawn by both Dick Ayers and Larry Lieber, inked by Vince Colletta, and you can see Coletta's inking quite clearly. And here he is, Colossus fighting with Fin Fang Foom, and it turns out that Fin Fang Foom was under the control of some villain here. I don't remember his name. And to fight the Colossus, and this guy, what's his name? He'll tell us eventually. After the battle, he has this place where he goes and hides, and then transfers his mind back into his body. Now, they thought he was dead, but then suddenly in the morgue, he pops up and he's alive. But he wasn't dead. He's handicapped from an accident and confined to a wheelchair. Meanwhile, then we get some backstory, and we see they show some of the panels and covers from the previous issues, and something else is going on here. But here's that same a-hole actor who abandoned Diane. And this evil scientist was controlling Fin Fang Foom because he wanted to get control of the Colossus. He had a way of putting his mind in the Colossus, because he was dying from something, and he thought he would be both immortal and incredibly powerful, and if he could inhabit the body of the Colossus. So this is a fun tale, and at one point, the Fin Fang Foom is momentarily freed from the will of this evil scientist, the villain, and they fought together for a time before he regained control, and they fought against each other. Here he's freed, and Fin Fang Foom is freed, and while he can't speak, he draws an image of the man who was controlling him, and it's Dr. Vault. That was his name, Dr. Vault. So he knows who the villain is in this deal. Meanwhile, Fin Fang Foom goes off. And that is just the tip of the iceberg of the Marvel monsters. And I love the Marvel monsters. Primarily the stuff done by Jack Kirby, but not exclusively. Steve Ditko did admirable work there, although I prefer his work on the straight horror stories. And various other artists did some other stuff along that line. but it was primarily Jack Kirby. And these are just all good fun, and I really enjoy these comics, and I like this character, and these are some great covers here. Some really great covers. I like Fin Fang Foom, and that's kind of funny. While most of the Marvel monsters are not part of the overall universe continuity, a few of them are. And they've even brought some of them back in later incarnations, later monster comics, mostly with tongue in cheek for that. But anyway, that's a lot of fun. I hope you enjoyed it. Please like, share, subscribe, share with your nostalgic friends or people who just like kaiju, etc. Remember, comics are art.